Hello, boils and ghouls. Welcome back to the Horror After Dark podcast in the sack with JT. Shudder's The 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time. This is an 8-hour long, 8-episode miniseries on Shudder from last year, 2022, where they have actors, directors, horror journalists, etc., and they count down the 101 scariest horror movie moments. So it's not movies, it's actual scenes in the movies they bring up on this list. Now, I've seen this before, so some of the movies, they are talking about one specific movie moment, like one scene in that movie. Others, they go on and talk about the movie more. So this was my whole dilemma of, it's an hour-long episode each for 8 hours. You know, obviously it's not going to be an 8-hour-long thing here, but I was thinking of the best way to do this. So finally I settled on this way. So we're going to do it this way. So, with no further ado, let's start counting down Shudder's 101 scariest horror movie moments of all time. Now, just to give an idea of some of the people talking in the documentary, if you haven't seen it, we have Tony Todd, we have Mick Garris, we have John Landis, we have a lot of big-name horror icons, directors, actors, actresses that are talking about all these different scenes throughout horror that they rank as their 101 best. Now, number 101 is It Follows from 2014. Now, the scene that they're talking about in particular is the introduction scene with the girl, when we see that there's obviously something wrong with her and she's being chased by something. And we don't know yet the first time we see It Follows. And then when she ends up going to the beach and then getting her leg snapped completely backwards, and that image that we get of seeing her dead on the beach with the broken leg, that is a great scene. This is a great movie. I've always loved It Follows. We just got some news that we're finally getting a sequel to It Follows. They Follow. So I personally can't wait for that. I'm a huge fan of Micah Monroe also. She is supposed to be returning for this sequel. But great scene, great movie. So 101 is It Follows, intro scene. Side note, we have the great Keith David here that's just talking about The Thing and the effects and everything, and then seeing it in the theater. It's my favorite film of all time. Can't not mention that. And then Mike Flanagan, who is another director I really, really love and enjoy most of his stuff that I have seen. He talks a decent amount throughout this documentary, and it's very, very cool to hear a lot of the stuff coming out of his mouth. He, I think, is a very, very visionary director, and I have to catch up on his last few TV miniseries for Netflix. They just released Fall of the House of Usher, which is his last one for Netflix with his deal, and then now he's going over to Amazon, I believe. But yeah, these are some of the people that are talking about these iconic movie moments here. Number 100 is a film I don't think I've seen. If I have, I don't remember it at all. Like, this scene that they're talking about seems a little familiar, but this movie is a Spanish film from 2007 called The Orphanage. And it's about this woman who returns to her childhood home, which was an orphanage, and plans to turn it into a school for disabled kids, and there's some haunting that's going on. And the scene that they're discussing here is this scene where the woman is playing a game with the spirit of this kid. I think it's her child. And this 1, 2, 3 knock on the wall, then you're supposed to turn and you're supposed to see something, and they do it a few times, and then there's a pretty creepy jump scare here. But this is one that I have not seen, if I recall correctly. Like, this scene does look a little familiar, but again, I've seen this countdown before, and who knows if I've seen this scene in something else before. But if you guys have seen it, let me know, and as we go through this, let me know what you guys feel about these particular scenes that are being highlighted from all these movies. So number 100, 2007 is The Orphanage. Number 99 is Tobe Hooper's Salem's Lot adaptation from 1979. I've always thought this was a very, very atmospheric and creepy series here. And I think it's a great adaptation off the book. This is the second novel from Stephen King, Salem's Lot. It's one of my favorite novels of his. And as I always say with Hooper, how great he is with visual imagery. The scene that they're discussing here is the infamous scene with the child vampire who the other kid sees outside his window, and he's trying to convince him to let him in. All of that is very creepy. The atmosphere is off the charts. It's a great scene. So number 99, Salem's Lot, 1979, Tobe Hooper. Okay, number 98 is The Horror of Dracula from 1958, a Hammer film, which some of you know I've brought it up maybe once or twice. I'm not a huge Hammer fan. Like, there are some good ones that I do enjoy, but even then, I don't watch them often. This is one of them, though. This is a great, great movie. Probably my favorite adaptation of the story of Dracula, besides the original. This one's with Peter Cushing and obviously Christopher Lee as Dracula, and they're talking about the scene when we first find out that he is a vampire, that he's not just a regular human being. And his iconic close-up shot of Christopher Lee with the mouth bloody after the other vampire bites the guy, he looks fantastic. So, great scene, and it's a great movie. Gotta rewatch this one soon. It's been years. But Hammer's Horror of Dracula, 1958, at number 98. Alright, number 97 is fantastic. Black Sabbath from Mario Bava from 1963. Some of you know how much I adore Mario Bava. He actually has the most number of films on my top 40 films of all time list. I am just crazy about Bava. And even though this is nowhere near my favorite Bava film, I mean, this is one of my favorite anthologies, for sure. And they're discussing here the obvious choice, which I knew the first time I saw this they were going to go with, is the third segment, A Drop of Water, with just the creepiest face ever put to film. Like, this woman's corpse is so terrifying. Her face, the makeup job is it is so scary. Like, it's one of the most creepy, if not the creepiest face in a horror movie for me. So I knew this was going to be the moment. It's such a great segment. It's such a great film from Bava. Bava, as I always say, never made a bad film. So, number 97, Black Sabbath from 1963, Mario Bava. Number 96 is a very good film with a great scene they're talking about. Even though it's not a favorite of mine, it's 2001's Japanese horror Pulse, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And anyone who hasn't seen this movie, I'm going to try to give brief synopsises for each one, but trying to leave out as much details as possible, just in case you haven't seen these movies. That way you can go check them out if it sounds like something that might intrigue you. But they're talking about this great, immensely atmospheric scene where this character sees this ghost woman, and the way that she moves, and they talk about it extensively here, and they're absolutely correct. The way it was shot, they shot it at a very high speed and then slowed it down, but the way that she moves towards the character walking towards him, it is so well shot. It is so dreadful. Like, it is a very, very creepy scene. So, this is a movie I gotta rewatch, because this is a great Japanese horror. But like I said, it's not a favorite, but there is some great stuff in here. So, Pulse from 2001 by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Great movie at number 96. Oh, so I just mentioned trying to put synopsises in quick, and then I totally didn't say what this movie's about. It's basically, without giving too much away, it's kind of a play on both. It's a ghost story and like a technological horror story of fears of the internet. It's basically like a ghost trying to invade our world through the internet. It's an interesting concept, so definitely give it a watch if you haven't seen it. Pulse. Okay, number 95 is The Strangers from 2008 from Brian Bertino with Liv Tyler, Scott Speedman. Most people know this movie, and they don't really talk about a specific scene here. They kind of just go through the entire film and just how great this movie is, which this is a great film. It's, anyone hasn't seen The Strangers, it's about a home invasion, basically, is all I'll say. home invasion happens with some creepy masked individuals doing the invading. But there is a lot of suspense in this film. But for me, most memorably, and I think for a lot of people, it's just the ending and the reason that these people did this to this couple. The reasoning they give, the answer of why, that's probably the creepiest and scariest thing in this entire film. But yeah, The Strangers from 2008, which I actually like The Strangers Pray at Night, the sequel, a little better. So I'm not huge on this film as much as other people are, but it is a great film. So that's number 95, The Strangers. Number 94 is the original The Wolfman, directed by George Wagner from 1941. Now, I've said before, just like with Hammer, I'm not huge on the original Universal monster movies. I've seen most of them, and there are like maybe 3 that I do enjoy, but I don't watch them often at all. I can't remember the last time I saw this movie, but The Wolfman is one of them. The Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Dracula. Dracula probably the one that I've seen the most, but those 3 are pretty much the only ones I really have always loved. And still, as I said, I don't watch them often. Number 93 is the original Cat People from 1942. Now, I saw this movie once when I was a kid, and that's pretty much the case with a lot, if not most, horror films, like pre-Psycho and Black Sunday from Mario Bava, like pre-1960. I'm just not as big a fan of horror or films from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. There are some, and like I said, a lot of these old classics are ones that I saw as a kid, or like maybe a preteen or something like that, and then I've never seen since. So I don't remember caring for this. I don't care for the remake really either from the 80s. Like, I know some people love that movie. I've never cared for it. This whole movie doesn't really do anything for me, so that's number 93, Cat People. But I do like this list, and this is why I wanted to do this, because you get a lot of movies on here that you wouldn't get on a mainstream list, like on your common average mainstream horror countdown list. You get a lot of movies outside the box, like either older films, classic films, foreign films. Like, you get everything on this list, which is, yeah, one of the reasons I wanted to go through this. Number 92 is Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds from 1963. Now, this movie gets a lot of shit from horror fans sometimes, like for just how ridiculous it is. It still has some effective stuff in here, like the scene where the woman finds the guy with his eyes gouged out. I mean, this is 1963. So, I mean, like Hitchcock usually did, he knew how to go there, especially for the time. But I have more memories of this from going to Universal Studios as a kid and having they would simulate being in the scene from The Birds. It was like not a ride, but like some kind of a ride. They would show from Psycho, they'd show you the actual set of the house and Bates Motel, and then you would go through this simulation of the birds, and it would feel like birds were like with 3D glasses, like they're coming at you, and you had wind and stuff, like one of those type of things. So I remember that more than most of this movie, because I haven't watched The Birds, I can't even tell you how long, but good movie. It's Hitchcock, so you can't go wrong. So number 92, The Birds from 1963. Alright, number 91 is in my top 20 films of all time. David Lynch's Mulholland Drive from 2001. And they are particularly talking about the Winky's dream scene. And this is one of the best jump scares ever. I'm not even going to give a synopsis if people haven't seen it, which I haven't done anyway, really, through most of these, and it's probably going to stay that way. But if you haven't seen David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, go watch it right now. Stop this and go watch it, because the whole movie is a masterpiece. But that's one of the best jump scares ever. And this isn't really even a horror movie, and this is why I like this list so much, because they do explore other films that have horror elements in it. and aren't just pure horror films, because Mulholland Drive is not really a horror movie, but there's definitely horrific stuff, like with most Lynch. And I mean, you guys know David Lynch is one of my favorite directors. Like I said, this is my top films of all times. Just go see it. Number 91, Mulholland Drive from 2001. Number 90 is Child's Play from 1988 from Tom Holland. I don't think anyone doesn't know Child's Play, and they are particularly talking about the scene where Andy's mom finally finds the batteries aren't in the doll, and then Chucky finally, comes to life in front of her and has the whole struggle with her and everything. And there is so much suspense in this scene. One of my favorite franchises in horror is Child's Play, like from beginning to end, pretty much. Great to see it on here. I forget if Child's Play 2 is on here, but it should be, because it's my favorite in the franchise. Number 90, Tom Holland's Child's Play. Number 89 is the classic American Werewolf in London from John Landis from 81. Now, this movie is just one of the best werewolf movies ever made. It has some of the greatest practical effects work in a film. Just the whole transformation scene, which, kudos to them, is not the scene that they talk about. So that was very surprising that they don't go right to the go-to to the transformation sequence, which is phenomenal, though. I do prefer the transformation and the practical effects work in The Howling by Rob Bottin, like all his work in there, a little more than this one, but both of them are just like the best werewolf transformation scenes in cinema history. They end up talking about the scene where the main character, David, has that dream where, like, there's the werewolf Nazis and stuff. That it's a great scene. I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't seen this, which shouldn't be many of you. I mean, most people have seen this movie. Like, please tell me that you've seen it. If not, number 89, go check it out. An American Werewolf in London from 1981. All right, that was the end of the first episode on Shudder on this whole series. So moving on to episode 2, and number 88 is Jordan Peele's Us. Now, I think this is his best film to date. I like it a little bit more than Get Out, which is another film. I love both of those. Nope, just didn't do it for me. For some reason, I talked about it for 2 hours. I think that's the longest discussion video on a film that I've done on the channel. And it turned out being Nope, which I don't care for really much at all. But Us is fantastic. Like, all the symbolism in this film, all the directing, all the cinematography, the shots, and they're specifically talking here with the whole scene where their doppelgangers, the Tethers, first show up at the house, and they're standing out there in the dark, and the silhouettes of them, and the imagery is fantastic. But what a great movie. The only issue I have with it is the whole ending and explanation for the Tethers. I know it's supposed to be taken allegorically, I understand that, but it's still set in reality here. And if you want to hear about this, just go watch my video on Us. So, number 88, Us, from Jordan Peele. Okay, so number 87 is The Witch from 2015 from Robert Eggers. Some of you know, and I know some friends of mine out there, you guys share the same sentiment that I don't care for this movie at all. I've tried multiple times watching this film. This is one that just never appealed to me. On multiple attempts at trying to watch this, it just never captures me in any way. I know a lot of people who love this movie, though. So, if you're a fan of witches and stuff, check out The Witch at number 87. Here we go. Much better. Number 86, Lucio Fulci's Zombie from 1979. Now, some of you know how much I love Fulci. And if you haven't seen this movie, this is another one. Just stop this and go watch it now. It's on Tubi. I'm sure it's on Shudder. I'm sure it's on many free streaming services. One of my favorite zombie films of all time. It's not in my top Fulci films, which it is for a lot of people, but City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, House by the Cemetery, Enigma even, there's a lot of other Fulci films that I'd put before Zombie. But it is one of my favorite zombie movies. And the scene they talk about is the iconic scene with the eye trauma, which is a classic Fulci staple, eye trauma, when the zombie is bringing the woman's head close and closer and closer and closer to the wooden stake, and you see that her eye is going to get impaled, and the way he draws it out, and just you keep seeing shots of the wood stake getting closer, and then shot back to her reaction, and then finally it just goes into her eye, and you see it all in great Fulci gore fashion. Such an iconic scene and such a great friggin' movie. So if you haven't seen it, number 86 on this list, Zombie from Lucio Fulci, 1979. The only movie also, I might add, that you will ever see a shark fighting a zombie. It's another reason to check this movie out. Alright, number 85. This is one that I really, really like, but I know people who hate this movie. 1980's The Changeling, starring George C. Scott. This is a great ghost haunting movie. Just check it out if you're a fan of like classic ghost hauntings. There's a scene in particular that I didn't even watch what they're saying here, but there's a scene that I love in this movie involving a ball bouncing down the stairs, which we've seen many times since. But this is one of the first and more effective times. I mean, Kill Baby Kill from Mario Bava, from, 66, comes to mind immediately as a much earlier example. But the way it's done in this movie is very effective, and it's George C. Scott, so he kills it like usual. So, number 85, The Changeling from 1980. Alright, number 84 is The Phantom of the Opera from 1925, and they're talking about the whole scene where he removes the mask. Now, I haven't seen this movie since childhood. I never really cared for it, so there's not much for me to comment on. It is a classic, of course. If you haven't seen it, and the Universal movies of old are your thing, or things that you're into, check out The Phantom of the Opera. That one's at number 84. Number 83 is another top film of mine, and my favorite film from David Cronenberg, 1979's The Brood. This is such a great movie. The script is phenomenal. There's not as much body horror in this film as later Cronenberg, but the story and the way that it builds up to the parts where we get some good body horror, which is the scene they're talking about here, is the whole reveal, Eggers' character, that she has these like sacks and stuff, and then she bites into them and like takes the baby, and she starts licking the blood off the baby. What a great disturbing scene. This is such a good movie. If you haven't seen The Brood from Cronenberg, definitely check it out. So number 83, The Brood from 79. Alright, number 82, I just rewatched like last week, is The Tale of Two Sisters, the South Korean film. This is such a great movie. It is so atmospheric. This is the film that led to the American remake, The Uninvited. And they're talking about this whole great jump scare scene in the kitchen. Just go see it. If you haven't seen A Tale of Two Sisters, absolutely check it out. If you've seen The Uninvited and you love that movie, you'll love this one even more. Like, for me, the original is better in every single way. And I do like the American remake. So check out A Tale of Two Sisters at number 82. Number 81 is Lamberto Bava's Demons from 1985. Another just Italian horror classic. Lamberto Bava, son of Mario Bava, obviously. I love most of Lamberto's films also. Demons and Demons 2 are just both balls to the wall fun. A Blade in the Dark is another great one, Giallo from him. Like, he's done a lot of great movies and helped work on a lot of Mario Bava's films. So there's nothing I can say bad about this film or either Bava. Any type of Bava gets a pass, always. For anything in my book. So, number 81, Demons. Check it out. Number 80 is Dr. Sleep from Mike Flanagan from 2019. Now, I just recently saw this film. I put it off. I wanted to read the book before seeing the movie, and I just never got around to it. Then this last Christmas, I bought myself a few books, and one was The Exorcist, one was Legion, one was a Clive Barker novel, a collection of short stories that has the Candyman story in it that I wanted to read, and Dr. Sleep. and I just still haven't gotten the time and gotten around to read the book. So I said, fuck it, like maybe a few months ago, and watched the movie. And it is a great movie. Like I said, I love Flanagan, and this is no exception to just his genius here. This is such a great sequel and its own thing at the same time. Let me say this about Flanagan. Flanagan probably, even though he's only done 2 so far, best streak of adapting Stephen King stories. He did Gerald's Game, and Gerald's Game was pretty much deemed unadaptable, like impossible to make it to screen. And look what he did with it. Like it's excellent. And he did the same thing here with Dr. Sleep. And the scene they're talking about is the kid getting the life force and the shine sucked out of him, which is a great sequence. So if you haven't seen Dr. Sleep, check it out. That's number 80 on Shudder's 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time. Number 79 is my 19th favorite film of all time, and has in my top 5 favorite film scores of all time. Candyman. This movie is just a work of art. It is absolutely perfect. Like I said, the score is in my top film scores of all time. Tony Todd's performance, Virginia Madsen's performance, everything about this movie is perfect. So they're talking about the whole scene with the bees in Tony Todd's mouth, and then how they're buzzing out of his mouth and onto Virginia Madsen, and that they actually use real bees. And Tony Todd actually let them put real bees. The stingers were removed. But still, like, the fact that he went there and used actual bees and put them in his mouth, and just to make it look so real and authentic. Like, kudos, man. And he even says it here. They show him talking, and him talking about doing that scene. And he says that he can even still feel them, like, buzzing, like in his mouth. He can think and feel the sensation. But he says, like, if you're gonna, go for something, you gotta go there. And he's so right. And what a perfect scene in a perfect film. So, number 79, Candyman from 92. Alright, and number 78 is 1978's remake by Philip Kaufman of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now, I said at some point in the past that, embarrassingly, this is just one of those classics that slipped by me all these years that I just never got around to watching until a few months ago. I've seen the original Body Snatchers a few times in the past. I always enjoyed it, but this is an absolutely phenomenal film. This is up there with some of the greatest remakes in horror. I have to give it a second watch to cement feelings on it, which I'll probably do a video discussion on it when I do finally rewatch it. But they're talking about the finger point scene, which is all I'll say, because it is a great scene. But everything in this movie was so fantastically done, and I can't believe that I actually never saw it until so recently. But number 78, Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 78. Number 77 is The Evil Dead from Sam Raimi, 1981. This is just another top film for me. Evil Dead 2 is in my top 5 movies of all time. Just perfection in every way. But so is the original. I love Army of Darkness. I love the remake. And I really liked Evil Dead Rise, even though I think it's the worst in the whole property. Ash vs. Evil Dead, the show, is phenomenal. But they're talking here about the whole scene in the original with guessing the cards. Everyone knows Evil Dead, so for some reason, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Number 77. Number 76 is Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake from 2004. This is a movie that, until recently, I held the original Dawn of the Dead over the remake. And then on my last rewatch, and when I covered it on the channel, for some reason, like, it really went up so much that it overtook Romero's original Dawn of the Dead for me. I think this is a phenomenal remake, and I'm not even going to give spoilers on what they're talking about. If you haven't seen the remake of Dawn of the Dead from 2004, go check it out now. I think they have it on Netflix, unless they took it off, but that was where I saw it a few months ago when I rewatched it and did a video on it. So check there. If not, I'm sure you can find it somewhere else. Alright, so number 75 is Annihilation from 2018 with Natalie Portman. This is a great Lovecraft type film. I haven't seen this in quite a few years, probably since right when it came out. I've only seen it once. But this is such a great film. It's visually stunning. And there is a particular scene here that I'm not going to ruin it, but it has something to do with a bear. And that's all I'll say. Go see it if you haven't seen it. If you like Lovecraftian type stuff, for sure you'll like it. It's about this group of scientists that get sent into this place called the Shimmer. And just stuff goes wrong, is all I'll say. But definitely check it out. So that is number 75, Annihilation from 2018. Great movie. Alright, number 74 is 1983's Cujo, adaptation of Stephen King's novel. The novel he doesn't even remember writing. He was so drunk and coked out, which is unbelievable when you think about it. I can't imagine writing an entire novel and not remembering it at all. Like, that's so mind-blowing to me. But the scene they're talking about in here, almost everyone knows Cujo. Great, lovable dog, gets rabies, goes crazy, tries killing Kid and Ed and his mother, Dee Wallace. And Dee Wallace just does phenomenal in here, like usual. She's a horror icon. And then the scene they're talking about is just being trapped in the car, which, yeah, is most of this movie, but they're pretty much going just with the tension and the build up here of just being in that situation with your kid and not knowing what to do. Like, you're stuck in this car with a mad dog out there who's trying to kill you. And the way that they capture it is perfect. I'm not a huge fan of this movie, but it is a pretty decent adaptation of King's novel. So number 74, Cujo. Alright, number 73 is David Cronenberg's The Fly from 1986, the remake of the 50s film. Now, this is just another masterful movie from Cronenberg. The effects in this movie are fantastic, and they talk on pretty much a lot of things that go on throughout this film here, but they do specifically mention the arm wrestling scene, which is a great scene. This whole film is so well done. It's so well written. Gina Davis is so great in this, and of course so is Jeff Goldblum. Everyone is great in this, their performances, but it's mostly the two of them. But just for the effects alone, this is just one of the great examples of body horror from David Cronenberg. So if you haven't seen The Fly remake, definitely check it out, because it is number 73 on Shudder's 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Times list. Alright, number 72 is Robin Hardy's 1973 folk horror masterpiece, The Wicker Man. Now, I'm not as big on this film as others are. I do think it's a masterfully made film. I do think it's a masterpiece. Without it, we wouldn't have a ton of cult, and folk horror films that we have. Like, I'm thinking Midsommar, is very heavily influenced from The Wicker Man, and just so many other cult films in general. But that's the first one to come to mind. But they're talking about just the whole ending of the movie when he's getting burnt alive in The Wicker Man, and just how savage it is, man, that these kids are involved and everything. This whole cult on this island, and they're just sacrificing this person because they think it's going to help their crops. And let's also not forget, without this original film, we would have never gotten the amazingly, hilariously terrible performance from Nicolas Cage in the remake of this movie. So, number 72, The Wicker Man. Number 71 is the classic silent film from 1922, Nosferatu. This film is essential horror viewing just once for any horror fans. Like, you have to watch Nosferatu at least once. It is just so well crafted. Usage of color and lighting is perfect in this film. And they focus here on the infamous shot of his silhouette, his shadow going up the stairs, which is just an iconic sequence. So if you haven't seen Nosferatu, and if you haven't seen the remake from, 79? Pretty sure 79. I know it's in the 70s. The remake I highly enjoy too. But if you haven't seen the original, check it out just to see it once. So, Nosferatu from 1922 at number 71. Alright, number 70 is a film I still haven't seen yet, so I'm just going to basically name it and move on. But I do love David Bruckner, the director. His film, The Night House, from 2020. Still haven't seen it, can't comment on it. Have you seen it? Have you seen The Night House? If so, what are your thoughts on it? Let us know. Number 70. Number 69 is Aliens, the sequel to the classic film from Ridley Scott from 1979. Now, this is another movie that I just recently saw. I've never been a big sci-fi person. I just didn't grow up seeing Aliens. And I finally saw it and hated it. I think the writing is atrocious in that film. But there is some good stuff, like I say with most movies. And I know people have a lot of nostalgia for that film. So you probably have seen Aliens, even though I didn't until recently. So you know what to expect. Number 69, Aliens. 68 is 2014's The Babadook, which I know this is a very split film. I know people who hate this movie. I know people who love this movie. I kind of fall in the middle. I really enjoy this movie, but the kid, the son, Sam, I think his name is, oh, he is so annoying. He's on the punchable kids list too. Like with a few others. Some of you know them. I can't stand the son. But they don't really talk about a specific scene. They kind of just go through the whole movie. But I think this movie is a great exploration of guilt and loss and depression from the mother losing her husband and then having to deal with this very, overhyped, eccentric child. I think it's a great movie. If you haven't seen it for some reason, go check it out. So number 68 is The Babadook from 2014. Which, by the way, I can't believe that movie's going to be a decade old next year. That's unbelievable. Wow, The Babadook is almost 10 years old. Number 67 is Wes Craven's 1972 film, The Last House on the Left. Now, this is one of my favorite Craven films, and I just said recently when I did the video on Scream 2 that I'm just not a big Craven fan. I do prefer his 70s films, as well as The Nightmare on Elm Street, of course, and a few others, but for the most part, I'm not huge on him. I love Last House on the Left. I think the remake is also very good. Same situation, since this is in the same type of genre, with the whole rape revenge stuff going on. I mean, of course, it's a very disturbing movie. But same with I Spit on Your Grave. I think the original is a classic, and I think the remake, I enjoy that one even more than the original. So I think both of the remakes of those two classic 70s exploitation films, the rape revenge films, both have amazing remakes. Like, they're both very, very well done. But they don't really talk about a specific scene, just about all the carnage that takes place in this film. So, I mean, if you have a strong stomach, or if you're a Wes Craven fan who hasn't seen the original Last House on the Left, check it out at number 67. Number 66 is Terrified from 2017 by Demian Rugna. It's an Argentinian film, which I've been praising his newest film, When Evil Lurks. That's on Shudder right now. Just came out a month ago or so. Definitely go check that movie out. I think it's probably the best horror film I've seen all year. So it's top contender for 2023 for me. But this is his film before that one called Terrified from 2017. And this is a good movie too. And I completely forgot about this movie until I saw When Evil Lurks and was reminded that, oh yeah, it's the guy who did that movie Terrified. So I'm not even going to spoil anything in this. Basically, it's a small village. There's an event that takes place in this movie that leads to things going wrong in every way possible. So that's all I'll say. Go in completely blind is the best for this film. But definitely check this movie out, and definitely check out When Evil Lurks, his newest film. So number 66, Terrified from 2017. Number 65 is Friday the 13th from 1980, the original. And they talk about the legacy of this film in general and stuff, and how can you not? But specifically, they focus on the jump scare at the end with the canoe, with young Jason hopping out and taking Alice under the water, and how similar it was to Brian De Palma's jump scare at the end of Carrie, which it was directly inspired by, and I'm pretty sure Cunningham has said that like on many occasions. So I mean, it's Friday the 13th. We've all seen it. We all know what happens. If for some reason you haven't, go check it out at number 65. Number 64 is George A. Romero's original Dawn of the Dead from 1978. I have a weird history with this movie. It used to be my second favorite in the original Dead trilogy from Romero. My favorite was always Day of the Dead. Then it used to be Dawn, then it used to be Night. But I still loved all three. Then, on the last few rewatches, including when I covered the three for the channel, something happened and Night just went up immensely for me. So Dawn dropped to last place. Then, like I said, I saw the remake again, and that one overtook the original here of Dawn. So Dawn kind of just went down for me throughout my life. I think it's just too comedic. It's not serious enough. Night is very creepy. It's so well done. It's so well shot. Having it in black and white is such a great decision. It's genuinely nightmare fuel. Maybe not so much with the gore, since we've seen so much more since, but the first time you see that movie, man, it's pretty realistic. And then Day of the Dead is another top 5 film of mine that I think has some of the greatest practical effects ever put to film also. So Dawn dropped for me a decent amount, but it's still a great movie. It's still a classic, and all the gore in this movie is fantastic. I mean, it's Tom Savini. We had Argento also working on this film, so everything about this movie, it's still a classic. It's just fallen for me in quality compared to the others over the years. So, number 64, Dawn of the Dead from 78. And number 63 is Michael Powell's classic British film from 1960, Peeping Tom. Now, this is a classic. This is a great movie. I've just never been a huge fan of it. It's definitely very important and very influential in horror filmmaking and filmmaking in general. Brief synopsis: guy has a traumatic childhood, grows up to be a serial killer, and he ends up going around filming the deaths of his victims and their reactions. It's a great idea, and it is a great movie. I'm just not huge on it. But yeah, classic film. 1960s Peeping Tom at number 63. Alright, at 62, we have John Krasinski's A Quiet Place from 2018. Now, I laugh because I'm not a huge fan of this movie, but to further showcase my insanity, I did an hour-long discussion video on this movie without talking at all, with just fake pantomime and fake sign language. I don't know, but hey, it's the only one of its kind out there on YouTube. It's a good movie. The sound design's great, and the lack of sound and all of that's great in this movie. The alien creatures look great. The acting's very good. It's just, I don't know, something's missing for me from this movie. The sequel also. I enjoyed the sequel less than the original, but I still feel like something's missing from these Quiet Place movies that prevent me from loving them. But they are good movies, so check them out if you haven't. A Quiet Place and the sequel, Quiet Place 2. But the original here at number 62. Number 61 is a film that I totally forgot about until I saw this, and I said, oh yeah, that's a pretty good movie. It's 2016's The Autopsy of Jane Doe. I know a lot of people who love this movie. I just completely forgot it existed, and it is a good movie. There's a lot of mystery in this, and it's just about these two people that are doing an autopsy on this body of a Jane Doe that they don't know who she is, and then they keep finding more and more weird stuff as they're doing the autopsy. They focus here a little on the tattoos, which, again, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, check it out. It's definitely a creepy film that doesn't get enough talk and enough love, to the point that, yeah, even I forgot it existed. So definitely check out The Autopsy of Jane Doe at number 61. All right, number 60 is another favorite of mine, both film and its franchise, Phantasm from Don Coscarelli from 1979. This movie is just perfect in every way. The franchise, if it wasn't for Ravager being as bad and disappointing as it is, it would be a perfect franchise for me. Like, of course, the quality in the sequels vary, but I love all of the Phantasm films from 1 through 4. I think they're all fantastic, but here they're just pretty much talking about the spheres, and what a great idea they were. These spheres that just fly around the air and then drill into your skull and then just squirt a bunch of blood out. The spheres become more and more prominent throughout the series, and oh god, I love Phantasm so much. So if you haven't seen Don Coscarelli's Phantasm, go check it out. Watch the whole series, all 5 movies, even if the 5th, like I said, is disappointing. Very disappointing. But it's still worth a watch to finish the series off. So, number 60, Phantasm from 79. Number 59 is 2002's Ju-on: The Grudge, Japanese horror classic. This is such a great movie. I've never been a fan of the sequels. I much more prefer the Ringu franchise. But if you haven't seen the original Ju-on: The Grudge and you've only seen the American remake, absolutely check it out. It is, like I said, a classic of Japanese horror. And the scene that they're discussing here is the ghosts under the sheets, which scared the shit out of me when I was a kid seeing the remake, because I did see the remake first, but it's done so much more effectively in the original. Such a creepy scene. It sticks with you. Definitely check out the original. So, 59, Ju-on: The Grudge from 2002. Number 58 is 1979's When a Stranger Calls. Now, the first 15 minutes, and that's what they're talking about here, is with Carol Kane, is excellent. It's such an iconic scene. The calls are coming from inside the house. Like, everybody knows this scene at least. For me, though, and for a lot of people I know, and they even say it here, that the rest of the movie's not that great. I never cared for the rest of this movie, but the opening sequence, 15-20 minutes with Carol Kane, is just one of the great suspense scenes in a horror film. One of the best openings, I would even argue, to a horror film. Disappointing that, for me, the rest of it just doesn't hold up. But if you haven't seen it, give it a watch. It's definitely worth one watch, seeing the whole movie, but even just for the opening, check it out. So, number 58, When a Stranger Calls from 1979. Number 57 is Bob Clark's Black Christmas. This is, of course, another classic. This is like the Christmas horror film, and it is the same Bob Clark who directed A Christmas Story, the family-friendly movie. That still blows my mind. And this movie was very influential on Carpenter for Halloween. The scene that they're talking particularly here is when we have the first girl who gets murdered and gets strangled in the closet with the plastic wrapping. And then you see her in the rocking chair in that amazingly disturbing image, just her dead corpse with the plastic like still stuck to her face, rocking. That is such an iconic sequence. That's such an iconic shot, and hey, it's a classic. So, number 57, Black Christmas. Number 56 is the classic, amazing film Jacob's Ladder from 1990. Now, if you haven't seen this film, I'm not spoiling anything, going completely blind. It has Tim Robbins, Shawshank Redemption, he's been in a bunch of other stuff. He's phenomenal. But there's a scene particularly here they're talking, and it's a dance scene where all hell breaks loose, and it is fantastic. So, that's all I'll say. Check out Jacob's Ladder at number 56. Alright, now number 55, I don't think I've ever seen, but I know I've seen the ending shot here that they're talking about, and that's 1984's Threads. I don't even remember what this movie's about. I wasn't really paying attention just now when they were talking, but there's a scene at the end where this woman gives birth to a baby, then she looks at the child, and she just has this look of horror on her face, and I know I've seen this before, so I don't know if I've just seen the scene before, or if I have seen this movie and totally forgot about it, so I can't really comment on it, but check out Threads from 1984 if you haven't seen it. Number 54 is the other 1981 classic best werewolf film with the American Werewolf in London, aforementioned earlier. Joe Dante's The Howling. Like I said earlier, I love this film. I prefer it to an American Werewolf in London. I prefer the effects. I prefer the transformation and all the practical effects work here from Rob Bottin. Maybe I'm biased because The Thing is my favorite film of all time, and that's also Rob Bottin, but I just think the transformation here is done much better. Like it's dark. It's brooding. It's much more creepy. Where American Werewolf in London feels more like they're purposely showing off the effects work, which is, like I said, fantastic. But there's a difference, and I think the atmosphere, the howling here, and that transformation scene, being shot in the dark, and just the way the werewolves look in this movie, love it. So, classic werewolf film. Check out Joe Dante's The Howling if you have not seen it, because it is number 54 on Shudder's The 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time. Number 53 is Mike Flanagan's 2017 adaptation of Stephen King's novel Gerald's Game. Now, I talked about this briefly earlier. I'm glad to see Mike Flanagan getting a lot of love on this list. I mean, I don't know if it's also because they have him here talking, like as one of the directors giving commentary like now and then, so they have to throw him on here, but I mean, I think this deserves to be here. The whole degloving scene. This is a scene it's hard for me to watch. This is one of the few scenes in a movie that is really hard to watch. And we see, I forget the main character's name, but she's handcuffed to the bed this whole movie, and she has to try to finally get out of there, and she ends up degloving her hand and to slip out of the handcuffs. It is so hard to watch, but the effects are fantastic. The performance is fantastic. It really sells it. This is great Mike Flanagan here. So if you haven't seen Gerald's Game, check it out. It should be on Netflix. Misery from 1990, directed by Rob Reiner. Another adaptation of Stephen King. I think this might be the best horror adaptation of a Stephen King novel. Now, my favorite Stephen King horror adaptation film is 1408. But if I'm thinking best, this is probably it. I mean, Kathy Bates, her performance in this entire movie is just phenomenal. And this is what launched her career, and rightfully so. And the late, great James Caan, his performance is phenomenal too. This whole story is fantastic. Misery, the novel's up there with my favorite King novels. And yeah, I think this is probably the best horror novel film adaptation of King's. If you haven't seen Misery from 1990, go check it out, because it's number 52 on the list. Starting at 51, 1931's Frankenstein. So I said in the first part of this that I'm not a huge Universal Monsters or even fan of most horror from 30s, 40s. There are some, but I mean, it's Frankenstein. You got Boris Karloff here playing the iconic Frankenstein's monster. The scene they're talking about is when you first see Frankenstein walk into the door backwards, and all the makeup effects still look fantastic. So number 51, Frankenstein. If you haven't seen the original Frankenstein, it is like in my top 3 of the Universal monster movies. I still haven't seen it in forever. I prefer Bride of Frankenstein. But check both out if you haven't seen those old classic monster movies. Alright, number 50 is Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. Classic movie. I've said a few times I'm not a big Craven fan outside of Elm Street, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and his 70s films like Last House on the Left, and The Hills Have Eyes 1 and 2. I do like 2 a decent amount, but I mean, you don't get more iconic with Wes Craven than Freddy Krueger and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Fuck that other series he does. But the scene they're talking about here is when Nancy's in the classroom, which her teacher is played by the great Lin Shaye, who I adore, and she sees Tina in the body bag in that whole first dream sequence Nancy has, which it is still terrifying to this day. The shot of the body bag on the floor and the legs lifting up and then just being pulled down the hallway, all of that looks fantastic. So A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984, number 50. Alright, number 49 is what we'll be watching on Sunday night. Mario Bava's A Bay of Blood. also known as Carnage, but also known as, and this is probably the greatest horror movie title of all time, Twitch of the Death Nerve. I say all the time, it's in my top Bava films, and I think this is the movie, many others agree, that really influenced and started the slasher craze. This movie directly inspired Friday the 13th, and Friday the 13th Part 2 just completely rips off 2 kills from A Bay of Blood. So this movie is a masterpiece, even though, let me say this, the story is so convoluted. It is so confusing in this film. Everyone's a murderer, but if you want to see one of the earliest, if not the earliest, slasher-type film that would lead to what we got in the 80s with all the slasher films, check out Mario Bava's Twitch of the Death Nerve, A Bay of Blood, whatever you want to call it, at number 49. Number 48 is the first Conjuring from 2013, I want to say. But they're talking about the whole hide and clap scene, and all of that has great tension in it. I do like The Conjuring 2 more, as well as Annabelle Creation, but this is probably my third favorite in the Conjuring universe. It's James Wan. I love James Wan. I love his directing style. Most people know The Conjuring, but if you haven't seen it for some reason, check it out. At number 48. Number 47 is Jordan Peele's Get Out. And I do like Jordan Peele a very decent amount. I love Get Out. I prefer Us. Nope, I did not care for, really at all. But this is a great film. And it's a very influential film. It was a very new idea when this movie first came out. And if you remember when it came out, you remember all the hype around it. They're talking about the scene with Catherine Keener doing the hypnosis on Chris, and he starts to fall into the sunken place, and yeah, everything they're saying about it is spot on. Just the fear that you'd feel in that moment, and that you'd have no control over your own body. And the way that it's shot is brilliant. It looks like a TV screen that he's looking at, like from like a deep abyss. All of that is shot excellently. Great movie. Get Out at number 47. Number 46. I don't even know why this is on this list, because it's supposed to be the 101 scariest horror movie moments of all time. But I don't care why it's on this list, because it deserves to be talked about. It is David Lynch's Episode 8 from Twin Peaks: The Return. Now, I was very surprised, like I said, to see this on here. Because, I mean, I guess you could take the whole Return as one 18-hour-long film, which, trust me, I've watched them all back to back to back to back. It is like an 18-hour-long movie. So I could see where they're going with this. This is one of the greatest episodes of television ever broadcast, in my opinion. Episode 8 of Twin Peaks: The Return, and what better time than now to announce this? But in December, it's going to be all David Lynch. We're going to be talking David Lynch December all month long. I can talk about just this episode of Twin Peaks for an hour or two. So we're going to skip most of this, but this whole episode is such a trip, man. Visually stunning. The sound design, like always with Lynch, is brilliant. And they don't really focus on a certain scene here. They kind of just go through most of it. But we have the woodsman with smoking the cigarette, got a light with this crazy deep raspy voice. And he goes into the radio station. He just squeezes and pops the guy's head. And then he gets on the radio and he starts saying that amazing chant over and over again. All of this episode is just Lynch to his Lynchiest. Like 100%. And we even have Joe Dante here talking about this episode. And just hearing his thoughts and him, like how he looks up to David Lynch, you could tell. Just the way that he's talking about Lynch and this episode in general, you could tell Dante respects the hell out of Lynch. So we're not going to get big into it. We got all next month to talk David Lynch. But number 46, Twin Peaks: The Return, Part 8, on Shudder's 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time. Okay, number 45, it's Pan's Labyrinth from 2006 by Guillermo del Toro. Now, I've said I'm not big into his stuff. It's only really this movie, and I haven't seen this movie in a long time, and maybe 2 others from him that I really enjoy. I got to explore more of del Toro's movies. Some reason I just never got big into them. This is a great movie. I just don't remember a lot from it. They're talking about the whole scene with the pale dude. He has the eyes in his hand. All of that looks fantastic, and I remember that scene particularly, so it's not a surprise they're talking about it. But this is one I gotta rewatch, but I know there are a lot of people who adore this film. So maybe sometime in the future I'll do a video on it. But Pan's Labyrinth at number 45. Alright, number 44 is a movie I can't stand. This is a classic film. Like, there are people who adore this movie, who call it an absolute masterpiece. Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby. I have never been a fan of this movie. I've tried watching this movie several times over the years, and it just does nothing for me. It's so boring. It's the pacing. It's so slow. And it just doesn't do it for me, if you can't tell. So they're talking about the whole dream sequence when it's not really a dream, but she's like getting raped by the devil or whatever it is. And then her husband, who's in on it, says that he was just trying to get some action and has basically raped his wife. It's such a crazy movie, but it does nothing for me. So I know there are a lot of people out there that love Rosemary's Baby. I will never dispute that it is a classic in the horror genre. It's just not for me. So that's number 44, Rosemary's Baby. P.S. Since Mia Farrow's in this movie, if this movie's never worked for you, like for me, watch The Haunting of Julia from 1977, or Full Circle is the UK name. Also has Mia Farrow. It's in my 20 films of all time. And I just recently saw it last year, or the beginning of this year, something like that. Instantly became a masterpiece. The score is one of the greatest scores in a horror movie, or in a film, like ever. So, if this movie, Rosemary's Baby, doesn't do it for you, go check out The Haunting of Julia from 77. That's my PS. Before we continue this list, I thought of something when they were showing the clips of Rosemary's Baby, and I thought of All Hallows Eve by Damien Leone, who created Art the Clown and Terrifier. In All Hallows Eve, there's a segment that's very reminiscent of the scene they're talking about, Rosemary's Baby. The devil's like raping some girl during a ritual, and that started out as one of Damien Leone's shorts. I think it was The Ninth Circle, it's called, and it made it into All Hallows Eve. So I'm sure he's very big on this movie, because it's hard to imagine that whole segment isn't an homage in some way to Rosemary's Baby here. But that brings me to a point. There's been a lot of controversy on Twitter, I've seen a few videos on YouTube, that the Terrifier 3 teaser trailer has brought out. There are people freaking out, mostly one big tweet, about the teaser having a kid on Christmas come down and Art dressed as Santa, and saying if you support this movie, then you're supporting child murder. And they said they love the first two Terrifiers. So now there's this whole debate on, should children be off limits in horror? Now let me know if that's something you'd like me to do like a stream on, so we can all talk about that, because I think it's stupid as shit, and if anything, we need more bodies from children in horror movies. It's horror. It's fake. Trust me, there's a lot more scary and horrific stuff happening in real life to children every second, and it's terrible just to think about it, but it's true. And Damien Leone kills and decapitates 2 children at the end of All Hallows Eve from 10 years ago. So what is this whole debate? But let me know if that's something you'd like to talk about, and we can discuss it. Children in horror, should they be killed? Or is that going too far? Let's continue on with Shudder's list now, shall we? Now, number 43, I just rewatched the other night. And then when they were talking about a specific scene in here, I'm very happy that somebody brought up what I thought when I watched it the other night, because I've only seen that movie a few times. But this is Inside, one of the famous films in the new wave of French extremity horror from 2007. Now, it's about this woman who is pregnant. She gets into a car crash that kills her husband. She survives, and the baby survives. So she's alone at home on Christmas Eve, and this mysterious woman shows up and literally tries to take her baby out of her stomach. This movie really goes there. Like, you see some crazy shit in here. There is blood everywhere in this house by the end of this movie. There is blood over here, there's blood over there, there's blood over everywhere. It looks like 20 people in a Mexican cartel were slayed and slaughtered in this house by the end of Inside. That's how crazy this movie is. But they're talking specifically about the scene when she goes into the bathroom and locks herself in the bathroom, which is right after this mysterious woman makes herself known by stabbing Sarah, the main character, in her pregnant belly, which is fucked up. And then she runs into the bathroom, and there's a lot of tension being built. But then she ends up coming out after her mom arrives at the house, thinking something's wrong, and the mom goes upstairs. She thinks it's the woman. She stabs her mom in the neck, and she's looking in horror that, like, she just killed her mother. She thought it was this crazy woman. And then the mom pulls, like, whatever out of her neck, and there's just a spray of blood all over the wall. And this is what I thought of immediately. It looks just like Tenebrae from Argento. The ending of Tenebrae. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about, with the blood spray. I won't spoil the ending for people who haven't seen it. If you haven't seen Tenebrae by Dario Argento, what the hell you listening to this for? Go watch that. But I thought that immediately. And I remember thinking this before, but this time I really just saw it and said, that is so Argento, that's so Tenebrae. And somebody talking about the scene here brings that up. And then they show the ending of Tenebrae real quick. So real cool to hear somebody else see that same thing I did. But this is a great, crazy fucking movie. So if you haven't seen Inside, it is on Tubi. Watch the original. Don't watch the remake. The same thing with Martyrs. If you haven't seen Martyrs, I just did a video on that recently. Go watch the original. Please not the American remake. But that's number 43, Inside, from 2007. Alright, number 42, I don't really consider a horror film. I mean, I get where they're coming from, and there is horrific stuff in here, but it's Seven from David Fincher from 95. I mean, this is a masterpiece of a film. This is such a good movie. But I don't see it as a horror film. But Fincher's a director. I don't think... Yeah, I've never covered anything by him on the channel. He's somebody I want to jump into soon, because Fincher has made some amazing movies, and this is one of them. But the scene that they're talking about is great, with Sloth, when they come to the guy's apartment, and they see the air fresheners hanging in the room, and then they pull the sheets off the guy, and he's been, like, skinned alive, and they think he's dead. Then the detective leans in, and he wakes up. Like, that's a great jump scare, actually. Now that I saw it, like, for the first time in a long while, and I think about it, very good jump scare. But yeah, this is just a classic. So 7 at number 42. Alright, number 41. I'm forgetting this list, like, from when I first saw this as I'm going. But here's another David Fincher film that's fantastic. That they put both Fincher films right beside each other here. Is Zodiac. Great movie. And what's up, buddy? This is such another classic. This is a very hard film to watch. And they touch on that a decent amount here, because they talk about the scene with the couple getting murdered in the park, and just how brutal it's shot, and how just unsettling it is, because you know this is based on true events. This really happened to these poor people in the park here, this couple, and just having to see them murdered the way that they are. It's really effective at just fucking with your mind completely. This is such a great movie. It's great to see two Fincher films back to back here. But yeah, number 41, Zodiac. Here's a PS on Zodiac that they just talked about. Tom Savini is talking, and even he had to shut the movie off during that scene in the park with the couple getting killed. This is Tom Savini. He's, first of all, he was a photographer in war. So he saw actual shit all the time. And then went on to make some of the greatest disgusting effects in horror. And that's how effective that scene is, and the way it's directed and shot, that even Tom Savini was severely affected by it and had to turn the movie off. That's wild. So figured I mentioned it. Number 40 is a favorite among many people. Just not for me. Like, they're good movies, like this and its sequel, 28 Days Later, from Danny Boyle from 2002. Yeah, I just never cared for these films much, this and the sequel. I do think this is a good film. I don't remember the last time I watched it, but I do agree with one of the people here talking. saying that the way that this movie looks, that she's never seen a movie look like this one does, I can agree. Like, this movie does have a very distinct look to it. Like, the way it's shot, the cinematography, like, it looks like a documentary almost, but, like, it's not. All of that is I agree with. I don't know, I've just always preferred slower moving zombies to the fast moving ones. There's some exceptions, like Train to Busan is fantastic. But yeah, 28 Days and Weeks Later have both just never hit me the way that they hit a lot of other people. And I know these are beloved movies. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. 28 Days Later at number 40. Oh, so the scene they were talking about, like I said in the first part of this countdown, sometimes they talk about a specific moment and scene in the film, and then other times they just talk about like multiple different things throughout the movie. So most of them are like a specific scene, but some of them they go off on tangents and stuff, which we all do. So, but the scene they're talking about is with Frank, the father that has the kid, the daughter, and the blood falls into his eye, and then he gets infected and he turns and they have to kill him. It's a good scene. Like I said, I gotta rewatch these movies. I haven't seen them in forever. But yeah, 28 Days Later at number 40. Number 39 is a movie I haven't seen since it released. Is 30 Days of Night from David Slade from 2007. I barely remember this movie. It's a little familiar as I'm watching some clips from it, but I don't want to ruin it because, like I said, I don't remember it at all. So I kind of want to rewatch this sometime soon, but let me know how you feel about this movie if you've seen it and you know it well, because this is one I definitely have to rewatch and I don't want to ruin it. But number 39, 30 Days of Night from 2007. So number 38 is Silence of the Lambs, which is a classic. This is another movie I don't consider a horror film. It's a thriller with some horrific stuff in it, for sure. Jodie Foster is phenomenal. Anthony Hopkins is just, this is one of the great iconic performances in cinema. Like I was saying the same thing with Beetlejuice with Michael Keaton. This is another one I can add on the list too. And they're talking about a lot of stuff throughout this movie. See, I told you. But they focus on near the ending when the FBI and stuff go to the wrong house and Clarice goes to the right house where Buffalo Bill is and almost gets killed by him, which is great with the whole sequence with he's using the night vision and she's in the pitch dark. Oh, that's so tense. I love it. But I will say this, there's no way the way that they film it and shit like that both Clarice and the FBI dude rang both those doorbells at the same exact time. But number 38, Silence of the Lambs. Oh, so good. I gotta do a video on that soon. Alright, number 37 is just another absolute masterpiece. Dario Argento's Suspiria from 1977. I mean, what more can you say on this movie? I said like an hour plus, so you can check my video on Suspiria out. They're talking specifically about the scene where Sarah's being chased throughout the academy and just the gorgeous lighting everywhere and the score, how it builds. And yeah, like I said, I'll go on for a while here. So just check out Suspiria if you haven't seen it, or if you've never seen an Argento movie. You already should be clicked off of this and watching Tenebrae, like I said a little bit ago. But if you're still here, go watch Suspiria now, please. At number 37. Alright, number 36. Alright, listen. If you've seen my video on this movie, you'll know that I respect the hell out of it for what it did for horror and a lot of other aspects of this movie. The Blair Witch Project from 1999. I am not a fan of this movie, but I'm not a fan of watching it. I think there's a lot of great stuff in this movie. And some of you know, Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. That's in my top 40 movies of all time. Like, it really is. Despite its flaws, like, I've seen fan edits that cut out all the studio stuff. I've seen that movie so many times. It's a guilty pleasure movie of mine. So all the stuff from the original here, with the lore, with Rustin Parr, Ellie Kedward, and Coffin Rock, and all the interviews in the beginning, I think all that's fantastic. I think the acting is fantastic. I'll always defend that. And I know a lot of people that will argue that and say that the acting's not great. No, with this, the way that they shot this too, the conditions that these actors and actors had to go through, that they were giving him less and less food every day. They were scaring him in the middle of the night to keep him awake and like sleep deprived. Like, they went through a lot of shit filming this movie. The marketing campaign was brilliant. This movie is an elephant tranquilizer film form for me. I can't watch it. It's so boring. I don't get anything out of watching this movie. They're talking about the ending. Okay, they go in, they see the corner guy, and he falls, and she's dead. It does nothing for me. Blair Witch Project at number 36. You gotta be fucking kidding me, man. Alright, number 35 is another movie and series I don't give a shit about. Paranormal Activity. I don't like this franchise. This is worse than the Blair Witch Project. Like, if that's an elephant tranquilizer of a film for me, the Paranormal Activity movies, that's like a coma in film form. Nothing happens in these films. Like, I'm sorry. All you see is drawers and shit move around and stuff until an ending where some dumb shit happens. That's the only way I could really explain it, of how I see these movies. I don't like a single one in the franchise, and I blame this franchise more for the huge amount of terrible found footage movies that we got from like the 2010s going forward. Like, I think Paranormal Activity had more to do with the blow up than Blair Witch Project did 10 years before. But, oh, what a bad series. If you like it, that's great. Like, I'm glad it works for you. It does not for me. But if you haven't seen it, congratulations. Paranormal Activity at number 35. Alright, number 34 is great. Thankfully. The Sixth Sense from M. Night Shyamalan. And the scene they're talking specifically is a scene that really creeped me out when this movie came out as a kid. The tent scene, which is iconic at this point. If you've seen this movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. With the girl, after the tent's being opened from the outside, and then Haley Joel Osment's looking around. You're thinking something's going to come in through the top of the tent, then it pans down, and you just see that girl fucking puke foaming at the mouth. That's terrifying. Like, that just brought back some childhood fear. This is absolutely M. Night Shyamalan's masterpiece. I say it all the time. I'm not a big fan of his because I feel like he peaked too hard with his first film here, and then everything since has just been worse and worse and worse, except for a few films like The Visit and especially Split. I don't know, I'm not big on Shyamalan, but Sixth Sense at number 34, great scene. Number 33, I'm not a huge vampire subgenre guy. Like, there are a decent amount of vampire movies I really like, and some shows and stuff, but it's not my like go-to genre. But this, I think, is one of the more modern masterpieces of vampire film. Is 2008's Let the Right One In. This is a Swedish horror movie, and it is kind of like a cute little friendship slash, I mean, they're young, so it's weird romance between this kid who is being bullied all the time and this girl who is a vampire. And this film looks beautiful. The cinematography is great. The performances are great. And then they're talking about the scene here with the pool. I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but let's just say this girl fucks some people up. And the way that it's filmed is fantastic. So if you haven't seen Let the Right One In, go watch it. Don't watch Let Me In, the American remake. It's not bad, but the original is so much better in every single way. So Let the Right One In at number 33. So number 32 is a movie I haven't seen since it came out, and I don't remember a lot. But again, like, The Invisible Man, which is the movie from 2020, but the whole character of the Invisible Man, like, no, the original, it never appealed to me. Now, there's some great stuff in this movie, and Elizabeth Moss is fantastic, as usual. I do remember that. Her performance is fantastic in this movie. I don't remember much else, so I'm not going to really go through anything here, because this is another one I want to rewatch soon. Number 32, Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man from 2020. Alright, number 31 is another one I haven't seen since, I don't know, I was a teenager maybe? 1967's Wait Until Dark with Audrey Hepburn. I don't remember a goddamn thing from this movie. I don't remember enjoying it, but let me know how you feel about it if you've seen it. I mean, it's Audrey Hepburn, so I'm sure the performance is great, but I don't remember anything from this movie, even seeing like scenes play out in front of me. So, number 31, Wait Until Dark on Shudder's 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time. Number 30 is a pretty damn good movie that I gotta rewatch because I only saw it once. But it's Don't Breathe from 2016 by Fede Alvarez, who also did Evil Dead 2013. This movie I do remember more of than films that I haven't seen in a while. There's an infamous scene in here, and that's exactly what they're talking about. It is fucking disgusting. I don't want to ruin it, but let's just say it involves a turkey baster and semen. That's a good compromise, right? Check out Don't Breathe. It should be on Netflix. I think that they usually have it. If not, check somewhere else. But it's a disturbing movie, I'll say that. But very, very good. I gotta rewatch it. Number 30, Don't Breathe from 2016. Alright, number 29 is Eli Roth's Hostel. And they're talking about the scene when Josh is being tortured and then killed, which is a very effective scene. Now, I know how split people are on Eli Roth. I really, really like most of his stuff, which I cannot wait for tomorrow for Thanksgiving. I've been waiting fucking forever. 16 years since Grindhouse came out, and I saw that in theaters in college. I know some people don't like his stuff at all, and they find his humor very strange. It all works for me, for the most part. But this movie, I think, is his best film, the original Hostel. And Josh's scene is really hard to watch at times. Like when he gets drilled in the leg with the power drill. And then when he cuts his Achilles tendon, and it splits, that split-second shot of it coming apart. That is so hard to see. Great movie. I gotta cover the Hostel film sometime soon. But number 29, yeah, the whole scene with Josh from Hostel. Alright, number 28 is a movie I adore. And just hearing Mike Flanagan say that Lake Mungo is one of the greatest horror movies ever made, period. That's his exact quote here. I don't think it's one of the greatest ever made. But just to hear Mike Flanagan have so much love for this movie, oh, that's so nice to hear. Lake Mungo. If you're not a found footage fan, and it's not really found footage, it's more of like a fake documentary. But, I mean, this feels so realistic, this movie. Like, it feels like a real tense, spooky-ass documentary that you're watching about this girl Alice who drowns and dies, and her family dealing with the guilt, and then paranormal stuff starts happening. But then it kind of changes to that it might be a hoax, so then it goes back to the paranormal, and then you just get a creepy-ass scene. I agree with it. Flanagan's talking for like 5.5 minutes about this movie. It's all Mike Flanagan, which is so nice. And he's describing the scene, like when we finally see the cell phone footage of Alice at Lake Mungo and what she sees. I'm not going to spoil it, but it is disturbing, man. It is so creepy. Now, this movie is slow. I'll give it that. But for me, it's slow in the best way possible, with the way that it builds. But I know a decent amount of people, this has been getting more and more love with each year that passes, I feel like. But I do know people who find this movie very boring, and they don't like it one bit. So, I don't know what to say to those people. I love this movie. So, if you haven't seen Lake Mungo, check it out, because it sticks with you. Some of the stuff in this film. So that's number 28. And yeah, Flanagan goes on to even say that when he first saw that scene, he physically jumped off the couch. And he thinks it's one of the scariest scenes in a horror movie. And that this is the first movie he recommends to people when asking for horror movie recommendations. So this is how high he puts it. Then says that it directly inspired him on his Netflix series, The Haunting of Hill House, which becomes number 27, The Haunting of Hill House from Mike Flanagan, 2018. Now, I was just talking about this with Carrie the other night. I'm a huge Flanagan fan. Early Flanagan, Absentia, and especially Oculus. His Netflix series, I never watched any of them. I've tried to start The Haunting of Hill House, maybe twice since it came out, but I gotta catch up on all of Flanagan's Netflix TV shows. I don't have a lot of time to binge shows. Yeah, never got around to it, but it's Flanagan. I'm sure it's amazing. and I've heard nothing but praise over it. Number 27, The Haunting of Hill House. Number 26 is It, Chapter 1, and they're talking about the opening scene with Pennywise in the sewer when Georgie goes out and gets his arm ripped off by him, which he really went there. I forget how to say his name. Muschietti, the director. I'm glad he actually put this on screen, and this goes back to the bullshit controversy with Terrifier 3 that I was talking about earlier, that maybe we'll talk about sometime too. You see Georgie get his arm ripped off and die brutally at the beginning of this movie, and it's fantastic because it's just like the novel. This is my favorite Stephen King book. Like, this is one of my favorite novels of all time, and as much nostalgia I have for the Tim Curry version back in 1990, I mean, this version is so much better in every way. It Chapter 2, I really enjoy also, and that gets a lot of shit from some people, like comparing it to the first one, saying that it was a big disappointment and letdown. I don't know why. I don't know what they expected. Like, it was exactly what I expected, and I thought they did a great job with that too. But the thing with a lot of King, and I've said this before, and the thing with this story in particular is King is very hard to adapt to film successfully. Like, there's not a lot of great Stephen King adaptations. Like, there are, don't get me wrong, there's a handful, but there's a lot of terrible ones too. Like, a much more terrible to good ratio of film adaptations of Stephen King stories. But it is, like I said, my favorite King novel, one of my favorite novels ever, and I think this is probably the best adaptations we're going to get of them. So, It Chapter 1 at number 26. Number 25 is a movie I haven't seen in a long while either, but it's a great one. I Saw the Devil from 2010. Now, this is like a revenge film that is very brutal and gory and graphic, and man, seeing some of these clips, now it's starting to like come back more to me. And it's fantastic looking, like the gore in this, and just the brutality of everything. But then they talk about the opening scene, which is a great scene. Like this I remember, with the girl in the snowstorm, and the guy just pulls over, and it seems like maybe he's there to help, but you know he's not. And then he ends up brutally murdering this chick, and like just beating her head in with a hammer. And it's like, it's really gorgeous too though, the cinematography, because of the snowstorm and the snow on the ground. But it's a great opening scene. Like, if people haven't seen this movie, check out I Saw the Devil, because I need to rewatch this too. But this is a disturbing movie. If you have the guts for it and the shit doesn't, you know, get you squeamish or anything, watch this movie. At number 25. Alright, number 24 is a film, again, that people love to death, that I'm not a huge fan of. Hellraiser by Clive Barker. Now, I've never seen past the third movie in this series. And I know they get very ridiculous, and I know that a lot of the later ones, the scripts were just random scripts turned into Hellraiser scripts, and it goes on and gets worse and worse. But even the original here and Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, I enjoy them. I'm just not big on them. Like, they don't do much for me. Pinhead's an iconic character. All the Cenobites are. And the scene they're talking about here is when Frank gets ripped apart at the end. With it, that looks all fantastic. Like, the effects are great in this movie. The acting is pretty good. The idea is original as hell. I don't know, it just doesn't grab me, the Hellraiser story and the movies. Maybe one day they'll eventually click, but till this day, and I've seen it a decent amount of times. Actually, I rewatched it recently, a few weeks ago. Still just like, that's a very good movie. Then I just never get a calling for it again. So, that's how I feel on Hellraiser. I know a lot of people adore this whole franchise, though. So, if you haven't seen Hellraiser, check it out. From here on, it's pretty much all going to be masterpiece classic horror films. Because I remember as this list gets near the end, like, it's just one classic after another. Hey, I mean, that's what the list is for, right? So let's move on to number 23, The Descent. Which, what a great movie this is. What a great monster movie. And I'll tell you this. I said this when I covered the two movies. The sequel's not bad. The whole idea of getting her down there when she has amnesia and shit, like, it's ridiculously stupid. But it's alright, though. The first one, though, is so well done. And I said this then. I say it all the time. You don't even need the monsters in this movie. It creeps me out just seeing them stuck in the caves. I could not be in that situation. I would be freaking out every second. Like, I'd probably just pass out and die. So just seeing these women being trapped in this cave system, that's claustrophobic as shit for me. So when the monsters show up, then it just gets amped up to 11. But this is such a great monster flick. Like, I love the creature designs. I love the effects in this movie. One of the few good things to come from Britain. That's a shout out for my British friends out there. So, number 23, The Descent. Great movie. Alright, number 22. Some of you know I am a huge fan of the whole Saw franchise. Like, it is one of my favorite franchises in horror. And I agree with this placement and everything for this movie moment. Saw from 2004 by James Wan. And they're talking about the movie, but specifically about the ending reveal when John Kramer gets off the floor and he's revealed to be alive the whole time. I haven't talked a lot about like how I feel about like where these movies are ranked, like in the scenes that they're talking about, because I don't really care. Like, all these lists are subjective anyway. But I agree with this. This definitely deserves being number 22 on the, I wouldn't say scariest, but like the best horror movie moments. Everyone was shocked at the end of this movie when John got up at the end. I remember seeing it in theaters like it was yesterday, and everyone was like gasping and like, oh shit. People were freaking out at the end of this movie, myself included. Like, no one saw it coming. And I think with the score, that brilliant score in all the Saw movies, I absolutely deserves its ranking here. So the ending of Saw at number 22. Alright, number 21, another masterpiece, another top film of mine. Scanners by David Cronenberg from 1981. And they are talking about, of course, the head explosion near the beginning of the movie with Michael Ironside, who just kills it in this fucking movie. He is so good. His performance is like up there with some of my favorite performances in a horror film. Even though this is more sci-fi, but whatever. It falls under the blanket. It's David Cronenberg. The head explosion is fantastic in this. Even though I do prefer the one in Maniac, when Tom Savini blows his own head off, that I think is my favorite head explosion. But this is number 2, right there under it. Like, The Prowler has a good one, but I'm not a big fan of that movie. Scanners, just the effects in this are fantastic. But what a memorable moment with the head explosion. If you haven't seen Scanners for some unknown reason, head over somewhere and find it and watch it immediately. So that's number 21. We're heading to the top 20 scariest horror movie moments of all time, according to Shudder. Okay, so kicking off the top 20 is an awesome film, and I just did a horror survival guide on it, which is basically me just saying don't do this or do that, or this makes no fucking sense. Wreck from 2007. This is an amazing found footage movie, Spanish film. If you haven't seen it, it's about like a group of people in an apartment complex that an infection starts taking over and turning them into kind of zombies. So I just call them zombies. And the young reporter is doing a story on firefighters in her town and goes on the call with them to this apartment building, and all hell breaks loose. And then specifically they talk about the ending sequences with the night vision with the patient zero, who the design of that looks fantastic. It looks so creepy. If you haven't seen Wreck, go check it out. Believe it's on Tubi. But that's number 20. Number 19, the classic first adaptation of a Stephen King novel, as it was his first novel, Carrie, from Brian De Palma, 1976. This is another film that I consider one of the best film adaptations of a King story. We just lost the great Piper Laurie, who plays the mother in this. That is such a big loss for me, man. I was so upset to hear Piper Laurie passed, but her performance in this movie is fantastic. Sissy Spacek is fantastic in this movie. Who hasn't seen Carrie at this point? I'm not a huge fan of this movie, however. I will say that. It's not one I throw on often, but it's an absolute classic. And they're talking about the whole jump scare at the end, with Carrie's hand coming out of the grave and scaring the shit out of everybody, which directly influenced the jump scare at the end of Friday the 13th with Jason in the water, grabbing Alice, which they talk about here to great extent, but great movie. So Carrie at number 19. Alright, number 18 is another masterpiece of a movie that I say all the time does not get the love that it deserves. It is talked about nowhere near the amount that it should be compared to like The Exorcist and The Thing and Halloween and all the leviathans of horror. Is Richard Donner's The Omen from 1976. This is such a goddamn good movie. I love The Omen. I love the whole Omen trilogy. Omen 4 kind of sucks, but the first 3 Omens, what a trilogy of movies. But of course this original is, in my opinion, the best. And they show clips from the whole movie here. I mean, it's one of the best hanging scenes, which hangings, I've said, don't do much for me, but unless it's this movie or Suspiria or Mario Bava's Twitch of the Death Nerve that have some real original hanging sequences. Besides that, they don't do much for me. But they're talking mostly about David Warner's decapitation with the painted glass, which is such a great effect. And we get to hear Greg Nicotero here talking about when he first saw it. He was just blown away, wanted to know how they did the effect, and he actually now owns the prop head of David Warner from The Omen. So, great stuff from Nicotero here, but what a classic, underrated movie. The Omen at number 18. Yeah, we're getting into just absolute masterpiece territory here. Number 17, George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead from 1968. Now, this used to be my least favorite out of the original Dead trilogy from Romero. Like, it didn't click for me as highly, like, growing up, as it has now, as an adult. Now I rank them, it's always been Day of the Dead, number 1. Then Night went up considerably, kind of like a fine wine. Like, as I got older, with age, I appreciate it more and more and more. It's an absolute masterpiece. Romero pretty much invented the modern zombie here, the zombie as we know it, with biting humans and turning them into zombies and feasting on human flesh. All of that was invented right here in this movie. And they're talking about the whole scene with the ghouls, because Romero called them ghouls in this movie, with the girl, the young girl who ends up killing her mother with the gardening trowel. What a disturbing scene, man. The way it's shot, it's shot so brilliantly, and it's very, very unsettling. Night of the Living Dead, 1968, at number 17. Number 16, another masterpiece, The Exorcist 3 from 1990, William Peter Blatty. This is such a great sequel. That's why when I did a poll recently of everyone's favorite Exorcist films, excluding the original and Exorcist 3. And surprisingly, Believer got the most votes. The Heretic was second place. There was hardly any love for Dominion in the beginning, even though they're pretty much like the same movie, but Dominion is done so much better. This movie is just fantastic. And they pretty much spend this whole time talking about this movie dissecting one of the greatest jump scares in horror, with the hallway scene in the hospital. I agree, it's one of the greatest jump scares in horror. The way that they go into it and start dissecting it, like second by second, all this is fantastic. Like, if you love this movie, check out just at least this part of this documentary series of them talking about this particular scene from this film, because they say some great stuff here. But Exorcist 3, if you haven't seen it, go check it out immediately. This is another one. Just immediately stop this and go watch it. At number 16. Number 15, and I'm glad to actually see this here. Final Destination 2. The whole premonition on the highway, which is my favorite scene in the entire series. It is another series I adore. I love almost all of them. 4 is a pretty big drop in quality from the rest, but I love this whole franchise. And this scene, probably like with most other people who have seen this, terrified me of ever driving behind a logging truck again. I still to this day, if I'm on the road behind one of those things, I immediately pass it by. It is so scary just imagining what happens in this movie happening in real life to you. Like, this sticks with you, and this whole pileup is just fantastic. What a great movie, and what a great premonition sequence. Number 15, Final Destination 2, The Highway Premonition. Alright, number 14 is another classic film that I've never really loved. Hey, it still made my top whatever number 70s horror movie list, so I have some love for it. I just don't, like, hold it up as legendary like some people do, and it's controversial, but it's Steven Spielberg's Jaws. Again, fantastic movie. Just, I don't remember the last time I watched Jaws or wanted to. 10 years ago? Maybe a decade ago was probably the last time I saw Jaws. I've just never been big on killer shark movies, even though that is like the killer shark movie. That whole subgenre of like creatures from beneath the ocean just don't do it for me. That whole subgenre, for the most part. There are a few, but of course this is a classic. I mean, everybody's performance in here. The score is absolutely iconic. The way that not being able to show the shark as much because it wasn't working benefited the film by not having you see it as much. And then they're talking about the whole opening scene with the girl swimming at night and when she gets pulled under the water, which is a very suspenseful and awesome scene. Even though somebody does point out, and I'm glad they did, that sharks don't hunt that way or eat that way. So none of it really makes sense, but it's still fantastic. So Jaws at number 14. Alright. We all knew this moment would come, and it's unlucky number 13. Fuck my life. Scream from 1996, the intro with Drew Barrymore, which I can't disagree. Like, I can't. That's one of the few things that I do highly enjoy in the first original Scream. You guys know how I despise this series. So I just don't want to talk about it. But it is an iconic scene. I mean, Drew Barrymore purposely took the role thinking that that would be the most iconic scene in the movie. And she was absolutely right. Even though the dialogue is stupid to me, and like there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't work either. Scary Movie helped a lot in making it even more iconic and memorable and that everybody knows it. But yeah, I don't think there's anyone on the planet who doesn't know at least the intro to Scream and is a horror watcher. I'll put it that way. So yes, iconic moment. Moving on from Scream at number 13. Number 12 is my third favorite movie of all time, John Carpenter's Halloween from 78. They pretty much just praise this movie as the masterpiece that it is. They don't really talk about a specific scene, and what more can you say about it? I also said a lot about this one in my video on Halloween. Check that one out if you want to hear more. There's nothing else to say now. Halloween at number 12. I was going to say check it out if you haven't seen it, but then I decided not to, because I thought, if you haven't seen Halloween, what the hell are you even doing watching this? And then I realized, let me just like record that too. So number 11 is another iconic scene from what I consider more of a sci-fi movie. And I've said many times in the past, I'm not huge on sci-fi, so this is not a masterpiece film for me. This isn't the one that I love to death. And it's Ridley Scott's Alien. There's nothing bad I can say about this movie. It's just another one that I recognize as the perfect film that it is. And that's it. I don't watch it often. But the whole chest bursting scene here, and that it was their actual reactions, they had no idea that that thing was going to burst out his chest. That's basically all they're discussing here. And why wouldn't you? It's one of the most iconic scenes like in a movie. So, chest burster scene from Alien at number 11. So kicking off the top 10, Shudder's 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time. It's a lot of fucking words in that title, man. Is another top 40 movie for me. Is Hideo Nakata's Ringu from 1998, the original Ringu movie. As much as I love the remake, the original is better in every single way. This is an absolute classic Japanese horror film, and to me, it's another perfect movie. And they're talking about the scene in particular when Sadako comes out of the television, which, again, it looks good in the remake, it just looks so much creepier here. But if you've seen and love The Ring, and you never saw the original Ringu, again, please go watch it. At number 10, Ringu by Hideo Nakata. Alright, number 9. I mentioned this one earlier with Fast Zombies, and this is a film that has fantastic zombies in them. The South Korean film from 2016, Train to Busan. Now, this is a phenomenal movie. But do I think this deserves the 9th spot? Like, on this list, or any list? Not in the slightest. And they're mostly just talking about, like, the film in general and stuff. So, number 9, with the scariest horror movie moments of all time, like the zombies in this film, I don't think so. Like I said, I would never, under any scenario, circumstance known to reality, throw this on a list of probably the 100 anything. But it is an excellent movie, don't get me wrong. Number 9, Train to Busan from 2016. And number 8, here's another one that I think is insane to be this high up on any list. This is a film that I think is a good horror movie. That's about it. I know people love this movie. Sinister. I don't love this movie. It's a good movie. That's about it for me. There are some creepy stuff, and the scene they're talking in particular is probably the best scene in the movie. When he's watching the whole movies, and then you see that whole drawn-out sequence before the lawnmower goes over the person's head, best scene in the movie. But this is not a favorite of mine. Like, I don't think I've watched this movie in, again, maybe a decade. Maybe it's time for a rewatch, but I know people love this movie, so I could see it on this list. But number 8, that's insanity to me. So, number 8, Sinister. Number 7 is The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty, directed by the late William Friedkin, which is another fucking terrible loss we got recently. They, again, talk about just how much of a masterpiece this movie is, but they do focus on the masturbation with the crucifix scene, which is just something you'll never see in a movie today, ever again. This movie's a masterpiece. It's one of my favorite films ever made. Number 7, The Exorcist. Number 6 is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining from 1980. This is another one that I think is a perfect movie, but I just don't watch often. I don't hold it as highly as other people do. Don't get me wrong, Nicholson's performance is unreal in this movie, but I do love the novel to death. And the way that Nicholson just looks like he's fucking nuts from the very beginning just takes something away from this movie for me. And that's not the only thing. There's a few other nitpicks I have in this movie, but pretty much it's a perfect film, or near perfect film for me. But it's just not like in my top favorites of all time, you know? But it is an absolute horror classic and always cited as at least top 5. So, The Shining from Stanley Kubrick, 1980. Alright, we're at the top 5. Number 5 is just another best of all time. Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock, 1960. They talk about the shower scene a bit, but they kind of focus on a scene you wouldn't expect as much. You would think the shower scene, but they go for the amazing scene with the whole top-down angle of Norman with the wig when you don't know it's Norman yet, coming down to slice Arbogast on the face, and then how he triply falls down the stairs and the camera's looking all wacky. That's such a fantastic sequence. What a brilliant decision to shoot it from an above shot like that so that it doesn't reveal the killer, and they go pretty heavy into all of that. But it's Psycho. What more can you say? Number 4. And do I think this deserves to be this high up? No. But this is another masterpiece of a movie. And I don't know why I'm suddenly in, like, I guess because it's getting, to the top 20 or so, I start really paying more attention to the rankings. Audition from Takashi Miike. This is such a strange film. It's a very disturbing film. If you haven't seen Audition, absolutely check it out. It's about this man who loses his wife, and then he holds this fake audition saying that it's for acting part for all these women, and he's really auditioning them to date them and for his next wife. But she ends up being, deeply disturbed, to say the least. The first half of this movie feels like a a romance film, like a romantic comedy almost. Then it just evolves into just this disturbing second act. And they pretty much just talk about the whole ending of this movie, the last 30 minutes or so, with the torture and the acupuncture needles and the ticky 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 ticky. All of that's fantastic. The piano wire sawing his leg off. Like, go watch it if you haven't seen it. But number 4, I don't think so. Audition, Takashi Miike from 99. Great movie. As much as this one at number 3 is also a film I consider a masterpiece, I have a huge issue with it being this high up on this list. Number 3, Hereditary from Ari Aster. Now, I said, I think this is a fucking phenomenal film. But number 3, this movie's always been very overrated. And I say that, again, as someone who adores this film. But it has been super hyped up and overrated and over-talked about ever since it first came out. And I know people who hate this movie. And they're talking about the whole scene with Charlie getting decapitated and Toni Collette in the corner of the frame near the ending, and what a great sequence that is when you don't even see her for the first few seconds until your eyes adjust. Like, all of that is so tense. I love this movie. Many don't. It's a very split film, but number 3, no fucking way. Alright, I settled with this for number 2. My favorite film of all time, John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982, and what I consider the greatest scene in a film. And that's exactly what they're talking about, the whole defibrillator scene, with Copper getting his arms ripped off by the chest of Norris, and then the fountain thing sprouting out of the chest, and the spider head. And yeah, I mean, go watch my 2 videos if you'd like on The Thing. It's my favorite movie ever. Number 2 on this list, I'll settle for that. Are you ready for the number 1 scariest horror movie moment of all time? Now, this is another masterpiece film, but again, I don't agree on number 1 for this, especially like the scene that they're talking about. I mean, again, they're talking multiple scenes here, but the 2 that they really talk about. But this is Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. They're talking about when Leatherface is putting Pam on the meat hook, which iconic scene, all the implied violence, the visual imagery from Tobe Hooper, the way he shoots his whole movie is absolutely phenomenal. The other scene they focus in on is Sally at the end of the movie and just how hysterically crazy she is from all of this. And the whole dinner sequence, which is just another iconic scene too. So, number 1 though, I don't know. I wouldn't put it at number 1. But I think it's deserving, whatever, for this list at this point. There are some weird picks throughout this whole list, but there's a lot of good ones. So this was fun counting this down, but number 1 is The Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. So that is Shudder's 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time. Do you agree with this list? Do you think that some of these are fucking crazy to be as high as they are, or low as they are, or anything like that? Leave it in the comments. Alright guys, I hope everyone's having a good morning, afternoon, or night. I'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.